Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Terra's Pride, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. Zentara Prime was the biggest thing he had ever seen. The station was so huge that it looked like a small moon floating in space. Thousands of ships moved around it like tiny insects. "Sir, we're getting a signal from the station," said Lieutenant Amy Ross from her chair at the communication desk. Jake nodded. "Put it on screen." The image changed to show a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. The creature wore fancy robes covered in golden patterns. When it spoke, the computer changed its words into English. "Welcome, humans. I am Ambassador Zektar of the Vorthak Empire. The Galactic Federation is ready to meet with your people." Jake stepped forward. "Thank you, Ambassador. I'm Captain Morrison. We're honored to be here." 3 days later, Jake sat in a huge meeting room with dozens of different aliens. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of what seemed like living crystal, and a few were so strange that Jake couldn't figure out what they were supposed to be. The air smelled weird, like metal and flowers mixed together. Dr. Lisa Webb sat next to Jake. She was the smartest person on his ship, maybe the smartest human alive. Her job was to explain humanity's new technology to the aliens. On Jake's other side sat General Ryan Brooks, a tough old soldier who had fought in 3 wars on Earth. Council leader Thais, a being made of clear crystal that sparkled in the light, spoke first. "Humans, you have traveled far to reach us. Your species is young, but you have created interesting technology." Dr. Webb opened her computer tablet. "Thank you, Council leader. We've developed a new type of faster-than-light drive. We call it the quantum drive. It can make our ships travel twice as fast as anything we've seen before." The room went quiet. Jake could see the aliens looking at each other. Some of them seemed worried. Ambassador Zektar leaned forward with all 4 of his arms on the table. "This technology, how many of your ships have it?" "Right now, about 50 ships," General Brooks answered. "But we're building more every month. Soon every human ship will have quantum drives." More worried looks passed between the aliens. A bug-like creature with 6 legs clicked its mouthparts together. "How fast do humans reproduce? How many worlds do you live on?" Jake felt proud as he answered. "We have colonies on 47 worlds now. Our population grows by about 200 million people every year. We're explorers by nature. We like to see new places and build new homes." The crystal being called Thais made a sound like wind chimes. 47 worlds in just 30 years since you left your home planet? That is very fast." Over the next week, Jake and his team met with different groups of aliens. Each meeting felt stranger than the last. The aliens asked lots of questions about human weapons, human ships, and human plans for the future. They didn't seem interested in trade or friendship. They seemed scared. Dr. Webb was working late in her room when Jake came to see her. She looked tired and worried. "Something's wrong, Jake," she said. "I've been listening to their computer networks. I know I shouldn't have, but I was curious. They're not talking about helping us join the Federation, they're talking about stopping us." Jake sat down hard in a chair. "What do you mean?" "They think we're dangerous. They say humans expand too fast and fight too much. There's talk about limiting us to just one star system." "One system?" Jake couldn't believe it. "We have people living on 47 worlds. We can't just abandon them." The next morning, General Brooks came running to find Jake. The old soldier looked angry and scared at the same time. "Captain, you need to see this," Brooks said. He led Jake to a window that looked out at the space around the station. Where there had been empty space before, now Jake could see huge alien warships. Hundreds of them, all pointing their weapons at Terra's Pride. Ambassador Zektar appeared on every screen in the human section of the station. His blue face looked sad but firm. "Humans," he said, "the Galactic Federation has made a decision. Your species grows too fast and fights too often. You create weapons that are too powerful. You are a threat to the peace of the galaxy." Jake felt his heart beating fast. "What are you saying?" "The Federation hereby declares the Exiled Decree. All human ships must leave Federation space immediately. Any human vessel found in our territory will be destroyed. You have 1 week to gather your people and go." Dr. Webb grabbed Jake's arm. They can't do this. We haven't done anything wrong. General Brooks was already talking into his communication device. All human ships, prepare for immediate departure. This is not a drill. The next few days were crazy. Human ships came from all over Federation space loaded with people and supplies. Jake learned that the aliens had given the same message to every human colony and every human ship in the galaxy. Admiral Ben Carter arrived with the Earth Defense Fleet. He was an old friend of Jake's, a man who never backed down from a fight. Jake, this is madness, Carter said as they stood in Terra's Pride's conference room. They want us to give up everything we've built. 47 colonies, millions of people gone just like that. What choice do we have? Jake asked. Look outside. They have thousands of ships out there. General Brooks spread a star map on the table. There might be another way. Long-range scouts have found something, a wormhole about 6 hours from here. It leads to unexplored space far from Federation territory. Dr. Webb studied the map. It's dangerous. We don't know what's on the other side. It's better than giving up, Admiral Carter said. I won't let them cage humanity like animals. On the last day, Jake stood with 50 other ship captains as they made their final decision. Behind them, 1,200 human ships waited in space. Each ship carried thousands of people, families, children, old people, everyone who wanted to stay free. We don't know what we'll find out there, Jake told the other captains. It might be empty space, it might be full of things that want to kill us, but it will be ours. Captain Susan White, a young woman who commanded a colony ship, raised her hand. I'd rather die free in unknown space than live as a prisoner in one system. The other captains agreed. They would leave the galaxy rather than accept exile to a single world. Jake watched on his main screen as the human fleet moved toward the wormhole. The strange space tunnel looked like a spinning whirlpool of light and energy. One by one, the human ships disappeared into it. Terra's Pride was one of the last ships to enter the wormhole. As they passed through, Jake felt the ship shake and twist. Strange colors flashed outside the windows. Then everything went dark. When the stars appeared again, they were different stars. Unknown constellations filled the sky. Behind them, the wormhole collapsed, cutting them off from everything they had ever known. Well, said Dr. Webb, looking at her instruments. We're alone now. Jake nodded. 50 million humans were now exiles in unknown space, but they were free. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 50 years had passed since humanity entered the unknown space beyond the wormhole. Helen Price stood at the window of her office on New Terra, watching ships come and go from the busy spaceport below. The colony had grown from a desperate refugee camp into a real city with over 2 million people. Helen was tired. Being the colony administrator meant she had to solve everyone's problems. Today's biggest problem was food. The crops on New Terra grew slowly because the soil was different. From Earth soil, the air was breathable, but it made some people sick. Everything was harder here than it had been in the old Federation space. Ma'am, Dr. Turner is here to see you, said her assistant, Pete Adams. Dr. Alex Turner walked into the office carrying a metal case. He was a thin man with gray hair who always looked excited about something. Helen liked him because he actually solved problems instead of just complaining about them. Helen, I think I've got something that will help, Alex said, opening his case. Inside were several small glass tubes filled with different colored liquids. Bioadaptation serums. One shot, and a person's body will adjust to almost any planet's atmosphere and bacteria. Helen picked up one of the tubes. The liquid inside was bright blue and seemed to glow. Is it safe? I've tested it on myself and 50 volunteers. No, bad effects. Actually, people feel stronger and healthier after taking it. We won't need to spend years making planets like Earth anymore. We can live anywhere. This was good news, but Helen had learned not to get too excited. How long to make? Enough for everyone. 6 months for our colony. A year for all the human settlements. Helen nodded. Do it. What else do you need? Before Alex could answer, alarms started going off outside. Helen ran to her window and saw ships landing at the spaceport, but these weren't human ships. They were black and silver with strange shapes that hurt to look at. Her communication device buzzed. Administrator Price, this is Captain Lisa Frank at the defense station. We have unknown ships entering our system. They're not responding to our signals. Helen grabbed her jacket. I'm on my way. 20 minutes later, Helen stood in the control room of the orbital defense station. Captain Frank was a young woman, with short red hair who had been born on New Terra. She was one of the first generation of humans who had never seen Earth. What do we know? Helen asked. The ships appeared out of nowhere, Frank said, pointing at the main screen. They're not using any technology we recognize, and look at this. The screen showed images from the edge of the solar system. Where there had been a small moon yesterday, now there was nothing but empty space and floating rocks. They ate it, said Chief Engineer Sam Davis. He was a big man with oil stains on his clothes. Somehow they broke down the entire moon and took all the material. Helen felt cold. How long until they reached New Terra? At their current speed, about 6 hours, Frank answered. The next few hours were the longest of Helen's life. Every human ship in the system came to help defend New Terra. There weren't many, maybe 50 military ships and 100 civilian vessels with basic weapons. The enemy ships, which everyone started calling the Devourers, were huge. Each one was the size of a city. They moved slowly but seemed impossible to damage. Human weapons just bounced off their dark metal hulls. We need a new plan, Captain Frank said during an emergency meeting. Our biggest guns can't even scratch them. Engineer Maya Collins, who designed most of New Terra's buildings, had an idea. What if we don't try to destroy them? What if we just make them go away? Everyone looked at her. What do you mean? Helen asked. I've been studying the data from our attacks. The Devourers use some kind of energy field to protect themselves. But I think that same field makes them vulnerable to certain frequencies. If we could build a big enough signal generator, Chief Davis shook his head. We don't have time to build anything big. We don't need to build it, Maya said with a smile. We can use the colony's main power station. It's already designed to send energy through the ground to every building. We just need to change the frequency and point it up instead of down. 2 hours later, Maya and her team had turned New Terra's power grid into a giant weapon. The whole planet would lose electricity for a while, but it might save everyone's lives. Helen watched from the defense station as the Devourers got closer to New Terra. She could see them clearly now, massive black ships that looked like they were made of hungry shadows. Firing now, Maya said over the radio. Every light on New Terra went out. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Devourers stopped moving. Their ships began to shake and spark. One by one, they turned away from the planet and flew back into deep space. Everyone in the control room cheered, but Helen knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers would be back, and they would be ready for the frequency weapon next time. Over the next 10 years, humanity fought the Devourers across dozens of star systems. Captain Frank became famous for her hit-and-run attacks using small, fast ships that the Devourers couldn't catch. Chief Davis invented new weapons that could actually damage Devourer hulls. Most importantly, humans learned to work together in ways they never had before. The real change came when humanity met other species who were also running from the Devourers. Scout leader Tony Martinez was exploring a system near the edge of human space when he found something strange. A planet, covered in what looked like giant beehives. This is Scout Ship Eagle to New Terra Control, Tony said into his radio. I'm seeing structures down here, but they don't match any known Devourer technology. Are they dangerous? Asked the voice from New Terra. Before Tony could answer, his ship was surrounded by smaller ships that looked like they were grown instead of built. A voice spoke in his head, not through the radio but directly into his thoughts. Human creature, why do you come to the nest world? Tony tried not to panic. He had never heard of aliens who could speak directly into people's minds. My name is Tony Martinez. I'm an explorer from the human colonies. We didn't know anyone lived here. We are the hive minds. We know of humans. You fight the metal Devourers. This is good. The metal Devourers destroyed 7 of our nest worlds. Tony felt excited. These aliens were enemies of the Devourers, too. Would your people be willing to meet with our leaders? 3 months later, Helen stood in a meeting room on New Terra with Queen Voice Zizak, who spoke for the hive mind aliens. Zizak looked like a giant praying mantis with gold and green coloring. When she spoke, it was still directly into Helen's mind, but now it felt natural. Your species learns quickly, Zak said. Most creatures run from the metal devourers. Humans fight back and win. This is rare. Colonel Mike Peters, who had been a young soldier when the humans first arrived in this region, leaned forward. We've been lucky, but we need allies if we're going to survive long term. The hive minds will help, Zak agreed. But there are others. The Resonants, who sing with crystal voices. The Storm Clans, who ride solar winds. Many species have been pushed to the edges by the metal devourers and the old Federation. Helen realized something important. Humanity wasn't alone out here. There were lots of species who had been rejected or driven away by the established powers of the galaxy, if they could work together. Queen Voice Zak, Helen said, what would you think about forming an alliance? Not just against the Devourers, but for mutual protection and trade? The alien's mental voice carried a feeling of approval. Humans think like hive minds sometimes. Yes, this would be good. Together we are stronger than apart. Dr. Jenny Adams, who had learned to communicate with crystal-based life forms, added, I've been in contact with the Resonants too. They're interested in joining any alliance that promises to protect smaller species. As Helen looked around the room at humans and aliens working together, she realized something had changed. 50 years ago, humanity had been exiled and afraid. Now they were becoming leaders of a new kind of galactic community. The Devourers were still out there, and the old Federation still considered humans dangerous enemies. But humanity was no longer alone, and they were no longer just trying to survive. They were building something new. Admiral Grace Kelly stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching thousands of ships move through space in perfect formation. 100 years had passed since humanity's exile, and now she commanded the largest fleet in this part of the galaxy. The massive space station Liberty's End floated behind her fleet like a metal moon, its lights twinkling in the darkness. Grace was proud of what humanity had built. The Terran Republic now controlled 500 star systems. Humans lived on, over 1,000 worlds, and their population had grown to 50 billion people. The Jump Gate network connected every human world, allowing instant travel across vast distances. Admiral, we're getting a priority message from President Walker, said Commander Matt Brown from his station. Grace nodded. Put him through. President Dan Walker appeared on the main screen. He was a middle-aged man with gray hair and tired eyes. Being the leader of the Terran Republic was not an easy job. Grace, we have a problem, Walker said. Intelligence Director, Parker has discovered something troubling. The Federation is planning something they call the final solution. Grace felt her stomach drop. The Federation had left humanity alone for 50 years, but she always knew they would come back eventually. What kind of solution? Complete extermination. They want to wipe out every human in the galaxy. The bridge went quiet. Grace could see her officers looking at each other with worry and anger. How long do we have? Grace asked. According to Parker's sources, they're planning to attack in 6 months. They're building the largest fleet in galactic history, Grace thought quickly. The Federation was huge and powerful, but humanity wasn't the same species that had been exiled a century ago. They were stronger, smarter, and they had allies. Mr. President, I recommend we call an emergency meeting of the Free Alliance. If the Federation wants a war, they'll get one. 3 days later, Grace stood in a huge meeting, hall on Liberty's End. Representatives from dozens of different species filled the room. Queen Voice Zak was there for the hive minds, her golden shell gleaming under the lights. Crystal Singer Thrum represented the Resonants, their body making soft musical sounds as they moved. There were Storm Clan warriors, ancient AI units, and many other species that had joined the Free Alliance over the years. Ambassador Claire Johnson, humanity's best diplomat, stood at the center of the room. She was a small woman with a big voice and an even bigger brain. Friends, Claire said, We face the greatest threat in our alliance's history. The Galactic Federation has decided that diversity is dangerous. They don't just want to destroy humanity anymore. They want to control or eliminate every species that thinks differently than they do. Crystal Singer Thrum's voice rang like bells. The resonants have felt the Federation's pressure for decades. They try to silence our songs because they fear what we might say. War Chief Khan of the Storm Clan slammed his fist on the table. His people lived on ships that rode solar winds between stars. The Federation has already attacked 3 of our fleets. They claim we are pirates, but we only defend ourselves. Grace stood up. The Federation made a mistake when they exiled humanity. They gave us time to grow strong and make friends. Now we're not just fighting for human survival. We're fighting for the freedom of every species in this galaxy. Over. The next few months, Grace worked with General Amy Turner to prepare for the coming war. Amy was the daughter of the old Dr. Turner who had created the bioadaptation serums. She had inherited her father's genius but used it for military strategy instead of science. The Federation thinks they know how we fight, Amy explained during a strategy meeting. They expect us to form big fleets and attack their strongest positions. That's how they fight, so they think everyone fights that way. Grace studied the holographic star map floating above the table. Red dots showed Federation worlds while blue dots showed Free Alliance territory. There were a lot more red dots than blue ones. What do you suggest? Grace asked. We hit them everywhere at once. Small, fast attacks on 50 different worlds. While they're trying to figure out where we'll strike next, we go after their real weakness. Which is, Amy smiled. They've been in charge for so long that they can't imagine losing. Their home worlds have no real defenses because they never thought they'd need them. Intelligence Director Noah Parker, a quiet man who seemed to know everything that happened in the galaxy, nodded in agreement. My sources inside Federation space confirm this. They've moved almost all their military ships to the border between our territories. Their core worlds are protected by nothing but old defense stations. The first attacks came sooner than expected. Federation fleets struck at human colonies along the border, destroying 3 worlds before the Free Alliance could respond. Grace watched the reports with growing anger. The Federation wasn't just trying to win a war, they were trying to commit genocide. Captain Steve Martinez led the defense of Haven Station, a major trade hub near the border. His small fleet of 30 ships faced a Federation force of 300 vessels. Admiral Kelly, Steve said over the communication link, they're demanding our surrender. They say if we give up now, they'll only kill the adults and spare the children. Grace felt sick. Tell them that humans don't surrender to bullies. The Battle of Haven Station lasted 6 hours. Steve's ships used every trick humanity had learned in a century of fighting the Devourers. They hid behind asteroids, used the station's defenses as cover, and struck at the Federation ships with weapons the aliens had never seen before. The Federation had energy shields that could stop most weapons, but human plasma lances cut through them like knives through paper. Federation ships were big and powerful, but they couldn't catch the small human fighters that swarmed around them like angry bees. When the battle ended, 2/3 of the Federation fleet was destroyed or damaged. Steve had lost only 5 ships. News of the victory spread quickly through Free Alliance space. More species joined the fight against the Federation. The slug-like crawlers, who moved slowly but thought very fast, offered to help plan attacks. The energy beings called Sparks said they would disable Federation computers from the inside. But Grace knew the real war was just beginning. The Federation had thousands of ships and billions of soldiers. The Free Alliance was smaller and had fewer resources. They would need to be smarter and braver than their enemies. President Walker made the final decision during an emergency meeting with Grace and the other military leaders. The Federation started this war because they're afraid of what we represent, Walker said. They're afraid that other species will see our example and demand their own freedom. Well, let's give them something to really be afraid of. Grace leaned forward. What are you saying, Mr. President? I'm saying it's time to stop defending and start attacking. Operation Homecoming is approved. Grace felt a chill run down her spine. Operation Homecoming was the plan to break through Federation space and strike at their core worlds. It was the most dangerous military operation in human history. The Federation exiled us from the galaxy once, Walker continued. Now we're going to show them that we're not refugees anymore. We're the future of galactic civilization. As Grace looked around the room at her fellow humans and alien allies, she realized that everything had changed. 100 years ago, humanity had been weak and alone. Now they were the leaders of the largest alliance of free species in the galaxy. The Federation had made humanity into exactly what they feared most, a force that could challenge their power and win. The final battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The war lasted 5 long years. Admiral Grace Kelly had grown old during the fighting, her hair now completely white, but her eyes still burned with determination. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the final battle unfold around Centaura Prime, the same space station where humanity had first been exiled 150 years ago. "Ma'am, General Brooks is ready for the ground assault," reported Commander Sarah Mills from her station. Grace nodded. General Ryan Brooks Jr. was the grandson of the original General Brooks who had witnessed humanity's exile. Like his grandfather, he was a tough soldier who never gave up. Today he would finish what his family had started so long ago. "Tell him he has permission to land," Grace said. "Captain White, how are our orbital defenses?" Captain Susan White, now an experienced fleet. Commander checked her displays. "The Federation's defense platforms are down to 30%. Our plasma bombardment is working." Grace watched as thousands of human and alien ships surrounded the massive station. The Federation's supposedly unbeatable fortress was falling apart under the combined attack of the Free Alliance. Explosions lit up the dark metal surface as human weapons tore through shields that had protected the station for centuries. The Federation had made many mistakes during the war, but their biggest mistake was underestimating how much humanity had changed. They remembered the scared refugees who had fled through a wormhole 150 years ago. They didn't understand the powerful civilization that had grown from those refugees. "Admiral, we're getting a surrender signal from the station," Commander Mills reported. Grace felt a moment of satisfaction, but she knew the war wasn't really over yet. Winning battles was only the first step. The hard part would be building a better galaxy from the ruins of the old one. Down on the station's surface, General Brooks led his troops through corridors that had once seemed so impressive to Captain Jake Morrison and his crew. Now the fancy decorations were broken and the golden patterns on the walls were blackened by weapon fire. "Sir, we've reached the main council chamber," said Lieutenant Kate Ross, pointing down a long hallway. Brooks nodded. "Remember, we're here to arrest war criminals, not to get revenge. Humanity is better than that." The council chamber was the same room where the Federation had declared humanity's exile. Now it was full of defeated alien leaders, their fancy clothes torn and dirty. Ambassador Zektar, the blue-skinned alien who had delivered the exile decree, sat slumped in his chair looking old and tired. "So," Zektar said when he saw Brooks, "the exiled children have returned to punish their parents." Brooks shook his head. "We're not here for punishment. We're here to make sure this never happens again." The real challenge came after the fighting stopped. President Ellen Martinez, who had replaced Dan Walker after his death in the 3rd year of the war, now faced the job of governing a galaxy in chaos. The Federation's collapse had left thousands of worlds without leadership, and many species didn't know what to do with their newfound freedom. Ellen stood in the newly rebuilt council chamber on Centaura Prime, but now it looked very different. Instead of fancy decorations that showed off the Federation's power, the room was simple and practical. Representatives from hundreds of different species sat together, talking and arguing and trying to figure out how to build a better future. The old Federation ruled through fear, Ellen said to the assembled delegates. They told everyone that some species were better than others, that some beings deserved freedom while others deserved slavery. We reject that completely. Ambassador Tony Clark, humanity's chief diplomat, stood up to read from the new Galactic Charter. Tony was young but wise, and he had spent years learning about different alien cultures. "All species have the right to govern themselves," Tony read. No being shall be exiled or enslaved because of their race, their beliefs, or their technology. The galaxy belongs to everyone who lives in it. Crystal Singer Thrum's voice rang like beautiful music. These words sound good, but how do we make them real? The Federation had millions of ships and billions of soldiers. How can we protect freedom without becoming tyrants ourselves? Ellen smiled. This was the question she had been waiting for. We don't rule the galaxy, we protect it. The Terran Empire will be different from every empire that came before it. Admiral Grace Kelly, now an old woman but still sharp as a blade, explained the military plan. Human fleets will patrol the galaxy, but they won't conquer worlds. Our job is to stop wars, not start them. If someone tries to build another federation, we'll stop them. If someone tries to enslave other species, we'll free them. The plan worked better than anyone had hoped. Within 10 years, the galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in centuries. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had been enemies for generations. Children grew up learning about different species and cultures instead of fearing them. Dr. Lisa Webb, now in her 70s but still brilliant, had developed new technologies that helped different species communicate and work together. Humans could breathe the air on alien worlds. Aliens could eat human food, and everyone could understand each other, despite having completely different languages. It's amazing, Lisa said during a ceremony celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Terran Empire. When I was young, humans couldn't even leave their own solar system. Now we're helping to build a galactic civilization where everyone has a voice. The ceremony was held on Earth, which had become the diplomatic center of the galaxy. Children from dozens of different species played together in parks where flowers from 100 worlds grew side by side. In the sky above, ships from every corner of the galaxy came and went peacefully. Grace Kelly, now retired but still honored as the hero of the war, watched the celebration from her balcony. Next to her stood Jake Morrison Jr., the son of the captain, who had led humanity through the first wormhole so long ago. Jake Jr. was now a ship captain himself. But instead of fleeing from enemies, he explored new worlds and made contact with newly discovered species. Admiral, do you ever wonder what would have happened if the Federation hadn't exiled us? Jake Jr. asked. Grace thought about it for a moment. If they hadn't exiled us, we probably would have become just another member species. We would have followed their rules and never learned to think for ourselves. In a strange way, exiling us was the best thing they ever did for the galaxy. The Terran Empire now stretched across 10,000 star systems. Humans lived alongside aliens on thousands of worlds, working together to solve problems and explore the universe. The Empire's fleet was the largest in galactic history, but it was used to protect freedom, not destroy it. Earth had become something special, a world where any being from anywhere in the galaxy could come to seek justice, learn new things, or simply find peace. The planet that had once been humanity's prison had become the galaxy's courthouse, school, and sanctuary all at once. As Grace watched ships from across the galaxy landing at Earth's spaceports, she remembered the scared refugees who had fled through a wormhole 150 years ago. Those refugees had been told they were too dangerous to live alongside civilized species. Now their descendants were the guardians of galactic civilization. The Federation had been wrong about many things, but they had been most wrong about humanity's greatest strength. It wasn't their technology or their weapons or their determination. It was their belief that everyone deserved freedom, even their enemies. Humanity had turned their greatest tragedy into their greatest triumph. They had proven that sometimes the best way to build an empire is to give everyone in it the power to choose their own destiny.